Namaste and welcome to the Transformation Immersion's December Mega Series, where you are going to meet various experts and coaches to help you in maintain your holistic well-being. I'm your host, Sonal Singhal, a techie turned holistic healer and a transformational coach. Most of us crave for sex, which is the essential ingredient of our existence. Yet most among us feel ashamed of our bodies and have hard time accepting our physical needs. We call ourselves modern, but when it comes to talk about sex, we want to bury ourselves. So, what makes us act in this manner and why do we judge sex as something bad? So, here is our golden chance today to get these answers from a sex and intimacy coach and a psychologist, Dr. Lori Beth Bisbey, who is on her special mission to take sex and conversations about sex from the shadow to the light. Dr. Lori has spent over 30 plus years in helping people to create and maintain meaningful relationships with sizzling sex, and that too without any guilt or shame. So, without taking more time, I welcome Dr. Lori Beth Bisbey on our series, The Transformation Immersion. So, Doctor, I always ask my speakers about their journey, like what made them choose their unique path. So, I would love to hear about your story of becoming a sex and intimacy coach.
Hi. So when I was 9, I realized that my sexual interests were different. Didn't really know what to do about that. When I was a teenager and dating, I found it difficult to figure out how to ask for what I wanted. But I was introduced to a man who was very dominant and very sexy, and I thought was the ideal for all that I wanted. And the first 2 weeks of our relationship to a monster. And so I was held prisoner for 5 days. He was abusive. He raped me. In fact, he choked me to the point where I died and CPR. It was pretty horrific. And as a result, I got post-traumatic stress disorder. So I went into training after I went to therapy to get rid of that. But I also areas that were of most interest to me were the treatment of trauma and also sex and intimacy, because although I was able to get treated for the post-traumatic stress, I had around my desires after that experience. And it took me quite a bit longer to get rid of the shame than it did actually the post-traumatic stress disorder. So I did a whole bunch of things, practice, I did some personal development, and ultimately decided that I would also train as a coach and take what I'd been using in therapy with people, move to a more coaching method to work with them around sex and relationships as well. So I decided what I would try to do is make it easier and quicker for people.
So, I mean, it was quite an unfortunate incident which happened with you. I'm so sorry about that. And many a times I hear and even read in some books that sex is an energy of conception and shall not be misused. Such thing confuses me, as not every time we are having sex for the sake of producing kids. So, what is sex in your view?
Well, I mean, so our bodies are made to experience pleasure. With women in particular, the clitoris has nothing to do with conception, right? That is purely a pleasure organ. Why would there be a purely pleasure organ there if we weren't meant to enjoy pleasure? Pleasure is part of our intimate experience and part of the connection that we make with a partner or partners. And so if you're from a traditional family, none of the holy books, in fact, say that sex is a bad thing. What is said is that you shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. They don't even say that sex is purely for conception. If you read them in depth, sex between a husband and wife is considered a privilege and a pleasure and something that they are to enjoy together to keep them close, because the idea is to make sure that they stay close and they stay bonded so that it is one relationship. So most sex is about connection, not about procreation.
So when we are born naked, and a newly born baby has no idea of shame. But with time, we are made to learn the ideas about sex, which I feel are instilled in us to create fear in our minds, to protect us, so that we don't get carried away with our emotions and or say our hormones and produce babies at young age. But do you consider this as a good strategy? And if not, then how and what should we teach to our kids so that they don't think sex is a bad thing in the long term or in the long run?
So it's not a good strategy. Creating fear and shame hampers people in their sexual development. It causes all sorts of problems with self-esteem and makes for bad partner choosing because people are embarrassed about themselves. It means that often relationships are unsatisfactory because people have no real knowledge. All they have is this idea that you shouldn't do this. And if you've taught somebody that something is bad over and over again, by the time they get married, that's ingrained. So it doesn't matter that you're now telling them it's acceptable. All the things they've learned all the way along don't just disappear. So a better way to deal with this is to teach your children that this is something that's natural. If you watch young children, toddlers discover themselves. And when they discover themselves, they usually end up touching themselves because it's pleasurable. So instead of getting extremely upset and punishing a child, you just be very gentle about it and tell them that this is something that they do in private and just leave them to it. We should be educating our children young about sex.
Okay.
And explaining to them that this is something that is special and for a relationship. And again, in an age appropriate way that isn't shaming and isn't frightening. You've got to give them all sides rather than just the fear part.
Very nice. So there is an element of upbringing where kids are passed on the ideas or beliefs from their parents about sex. But in between that, sometimes unfortunate events of sexual abuse can also create a deep impact on a child's psychology. So many a times, parents are not even aware of such mishappenings with their kids. And these kids, they later become adults and get married. So what type of behavior do you expect from such adults as married partners?
But people who have been sexually abused, where the sexual abuse hasn't been dealt with, tend to go either one of two ways. They either find sex very difficult and they don't take much pleasure in it. They might avoid it. They might get triggered by it. Or sex becomes something that is is just a means to an end, and so their emotions aren't engaged, so it becomes just a physical thing. So they have sex easily, but they're not actually feeling pleasure, they're not feeling connection. It's just something that they do to appease a partner, so that deep love-based connection isn't there because the trauma gets in the way.
So we have discussed about parenting sexual abuse so far. But as we grow up, we tend to make various relationships, and many a times sex is involved, which may or may not be a good experience. So, doctor, what do you think in this case? Like such a person's sexual experience with the previous partner hasn't been good. So then, how can one overcome with it and be ready for a new relationship? Because many a times I have noticed myself that people feel broken and helpless once they meet a broken relationship, and they develop a fear for going for a new one.
Yeah. I think that what you need to do is first figure out your patterns, look at your past and figure out your patterns, and then have some therapy and or coaching, depending on what the situation is, in order to resolve the negative feelings from that relationship. So you need to take some time to identify the experiences and resolve them, so that you've basically got a clean slate when you're going forward into a new relationship. If you don't do that, you tend to repeat the same pattern over and over again.
But many people don't even know like such type of help is available, and also they don't recognize that such a thing is lying within themselves. They don't admit that. So the other person has to bear the brunt of this thing. So okay, another question for you: how can one express their desire for sex if the partner is never in the mood?
So one of the situations for that is to you have to communicate about sex directly, and a lot of people don't do that. They're very uncomfortable with that, but you have to be able to communicate with your partner. And if there's a pattern of your partner never being in the mood, then you need to sit down and try and figure out why that is. Sometimes that requires the help of a coach in order to help mediate that discussion, because it can be a very difficult discussion. Because sometimes the reason they're not in the mood is because of a negative experience in the past. Sometimes it's because they're not enjoying the sex with the person. Other times it's just because their libido is low. And in order to fix the problem, we have to know what the problem is, and that requires talking. I see a lot of couples where one person's libido is high and the other is low. And we have to work on how do we make a compromise so that we meet somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so there are techniques there.
Absolutely.
No, yeah. So you said surrender is essential to being in flow. What is the message here?
For me, surrender to... For me, it's surrender. It's a spiritual surrender. For some people, it isn't. It's a surrender to their inner self. But that is about knowing your core, who you are authentically. And when it comes to sex, that's about understanding what you desire and moving with those needs. It doesn't mean that you just do anything. It doesn't mean you have no controls, but it's about being able to be authentic. And when you're in flow, that's when you're, when things are most easy, when you're at your most expressive, when you're at your most able, because you're going along the path that you're meant to go along.
Okay. So what can happen to a person if he or she curbs his sexual desires and considering it to be bad, or feel shame or guilt about it? What can happen? What will be the result of this curbing the desire?
What happens when somebody has shame about their desires? Usually what happens when somebody has shame about their desires is they don't end up getting them met because they don't tell their partner what they want. They find it very difficult to enjoy if they are getting the desire met because they're too embarrassed and they feel like they shouldn't be doing it. That really needs dealing with, or it won't improve on its own. You have to work on that directly. And there's a lot of techniques to work on that directly. The first thing is to be able to talk to somebody about your desire fully, who accepts you fully, who's not going to make fun of you, who's not going to tell you it's wrong, who's not going to say, who's just going to listen and accept what you say fully. Because that's when shame starts to disappear, when you're fully seen.
So, doctor, according to you, how much of the sex is good and how much of it is bad?
Well, in general, I think it's different for every person. There is
no such thing.
Yeah, bad sex is non-consensual sex, right? If you don't have somebody's consent, that's bad, right? That's not sex, that's abuse. But when you have somebody's consent, anything goes. So the only things that are problematic are things where you act without consent. So that means, you can't have sex with somebody who cannot consent. So you can't have sex with somebody who is a child because they're not capable of consenting. You can't have sex with a non-human because they're incapable of consenting. You can't have sex with somebody who is so inebriated, so drunk or high on something that they're not capable of consenting, right? That's bad, but that's not sex, that's abuse. As far as anything else, all of it is fine as long as it's okay with you and it's okay with your partner.
Okay. So, doctor, do you have any message for our audience?
We should treat sex the same way we would treat our physical health. We try to stay in good physical health. We try to be holistic about it, have a good diet, get some exercise, get enough sleep, and take care of our physical body. We should be taking care of our sexual relationships in the same way. It's no different. And it starts with you. You have to know about you, what you like, what you don't like, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. You have to love your body and love yourself first. And then you can communicate to a partner. If you leave it to your partner to figure it out, you give away control to them. And while that can be fun, if you have no idea what you want, then it becomes a problem. If your partner is ill, if your partner doesn't feel like having sex, then you don't know where to go with those feelings. So we have to learn ourselves first.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Laurie, for your valuable time and teaching us on such an important topic of our well-being, which is generally considered a taboo in many cultures. I hope many people to take advantage of this talk and approach you for help. Thanks to our subscribers who are watching this interview from all over the world. Please spread a word among your friends to register for this series and help people to enrich their lives with knowledge on different areas of life. I can guarantee that they will be thankful to you. And please don't forget to download 15 tips for radiant relationships from Dr. Beth's website in the link provided below this video. Would you like to say something about those 15 tips, Doctor?
50 tips for radiant relationships. It's a tip sheet to give you ideas about how to improve your relationships. Like one of the easiest ones is learn to communicate well. I know I've said that, but I will keep saying that. The best sex comes from the best communication. Setting aside specific time for your relationship. We're all very busy. We have families, and that can make it very difficult to have time one-to-one with a partner. That's really important. So ring fencing that time that you have together. And for most people, preferably not at the end of the day, because that's when we're most tired. So maybe a little bit of time on a weekend, or if you can manage it, a lunchtime, something that is where you have good energy so that you can really spend some good time together is another one of the tips.
Wonderful. So I hope that after watching this video, you are going to create a radiant relationship with Sizzling Sex. And do let us know of what you think of today's interview on my Facebook group, Body, Mind and Soul Healing. and join it there to catch me live every Tuesday speaking and giving you tips on various topics. Take care and keep watching the Transformation Immersion. Bye for now.